The Boy Who Heard the Iron Thunder. In the summer of 1867, deep in the dry plains of Nebraska, a 12-year-old boy named Elijah Carter stood beside a dusty railway camp and listened to a sound that would change his life forever. The sound came from far away at first, a low metallic rumble, then a whistle, long, sharp, powerful. The workers around him stopped swinging their hammers for just a moment. Even the horses seemed nervous. Then suddenly, through clouds of smoke and dust, the giant black locomotive appeared like an iron monster charging across the American wilderness. Elijah had never seen anything so massive. The engine screamed as steam exploded into the sky. Men shouted. Steel wheels crushed the earth beneath them. The train slowed near the construction camp while exhausted workers unloaded timber, iron spikes, and supplies. America was changing, and Elijah was standing in the middle of it. His father, Thomas Carter, wiped sweat from his forehead and pointed toward the endless tracks disappearing into the horizon. "Remember this day, son," he said quietly. "One day people will say these railroads united the entire country." Elijah looked at the train with wide eyes. At that moment he did not fully understand history, but he could feel it. A divided nation. Only 2 years earlier, the American Civil War had ended. The country was wounded. Cities in the South were destroyed. Families had been separated forever. Thousands of soldiers never came home. America needed something bigger than politics to heal the nation. It needed connection. The government believed railroads could save the future of the United States. Before the railroads, traveling from the East Coast to California could take months. Many travelers died from disease, starvation, storms, or attacks along dangerous trails. But now, powerful businessmen and politicians dreamed of something impossible. A railroad stretching from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Pacific. One nation, one railway, one future. 2 companies were chosen to build it. The Union Pacific would build westward from Nebraska. The Central Pacific would build eastward from California. The race had begun. Men against mountains. Elijah's father worked for Union Pacific. Life in the camps was brutal. Workers woke before sunrise every day. They carried iron rails under burning heat, freezing winds, and violent storms. Food was limited. Water was dirty. Injuries were common. Some men died without anyone even recording their names. But the railroad kept moving. Every mile mattered. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in California, Chinese immigrant workers faced even greater suffering while helping build the Central Pacific Railroad through the Sierra Nevada mountains. The mountains were merciless. Workers blasted tunnels through solid granite using black powder and nitroglycerin. Explosions echoed through the valleys like cannon fire. Snowstorms buried camps overnight. Avalanches killed entire groups of men. Still, the railroad continued climbing higher. America demanded progress. And progress demanded sacrifice. The towns that appeared overnight. Wherever the railroad went, towns suddenly appeared from nothing. One week there would be empty land. The next week there were saloons, hotels, blacksmith shops, gambling halls, churches, and newspapers. The railroad created civilization in places where only buffalo had once roamed. Some towns became powerful cities. Others disappeared forever. Elijah watched rough frontier settlements grow almost overnight. He saw cowboys drinking beside businessmen. Soldiers walked beside outlaws. Travelers from Europe, Mexico, China, and the eastern states all gathered around the tracks. The railroad did more than move trains. It moved people, dreams, cultures, money, hope. America itself was being rebuilt beside the rails. The darkness behind progress. But the railroad carried darkness too. Corruption spread everywhere. Powerful businessmen stole millions from government contracts. Politicians accepted bribes. Workers were underpaid and overworked. Native American tribes suffered the most. For generations, tribes like the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho had lived across the Great Plains. Now the railroad cut directly through their lands. Buffalo herds disappeared. Settlers flooded westward. Violence increased. Entire ways of life began collapsing. One evening, Elijah saw smoke rising from distant plains after a military conflict near a tribal settlement. He asked his father, "Why are people fighting over land that never belonged to them?" Thomas remained silent for a long time. Then he answered softly, because men believe progress gives them the right to take anything. Elijah never forgot those words. Winter of death. The winter of 1868 became one of the worst in railroad history. Blizzards buried tracks under mountains of snow. Food shipments stopped arriving. Workers froze to death in tents during the night. Elijah helped his father carry bodies into temporary wooden shelters while icy winds screamed across the plains. One morning, they discovered an entire work crew trapped beneath collapsed snow near Wyoming. Nobody survived. Still, company leaders ordered construction to continue. The railroad could not stop. Not for weather. Not for death. Not for anything. Elijah began understanding the true cost of America's expansion. The railroad was not only built with steel, it was built with human lives. Race to the finish. By early 1869, the railroad companies entered a desperate race. The closer they came to meeting each other, the more money they earned from the government. Construction became faster than ever. Workers laid multiple miles of track per day. Some crews worked almost without sleep. Newspapers across America followed the race daily. The entire nation waited for the final connection. Elijah, now older and stronger, helped carry spikes beside his father. His hands bled constantly. His back ached every night. But he felt proud. He believed he was helping build history. Then finally, word spread across the camps. The railroads would meet at Promontory Summit, Utah. The impossible dream was nearly complete. The Golden Spike. May 10, 1869. Thousands gathered beneath bright skies in Utah Territory. Workers, politicians, photographers, railroad executives, and journalists stood beside the two locomotives facing each other across the final unfinished section of track. One locomotive came from the east. The other came from the west. After years of suffering, explosions, deaths, storms, corruption, and sacrifice, America was finally connected. A ceremonial golden spike was prepared. As crowds watched silently, officials delivered speeches celebrating unity and progress. Then came the final hammer strike. The golden spike entered the railroad tie. Telegraph wires instantly carried a single message across the nation: done. Celebrations exploded everywhere. Church bells rang in cities. Cannons fired. Crowds cheered in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and beyond. America had entered a new era. Elijah stared at the joined tracks stretching endlessly in both directions. For the first time in history, a person could cross the continent in days instead of months. The country suddenly felt smaller, faster, connected, modern. The years of expansion. After the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, railroad construction exploded across America. Tracks spread like veins across the continent. Railroads transformed every industry. Asterisk farming. Asterisk mining. Asterisk oil. Asterisk steel. Asterisk banking. Asterisk trade. Cattle could now travel quickly to eastern markets. Factories received materials faster. Immigrants traveled west searching for land and opportunity. Cities grew rapidly around railroad hubs. Men like Cornelius Vanderbilt and other railroad tycoons became incredibly wealthy. But the railroad workers who built America often remained poor. Elijah eventually became a train engineer. He spent decades traveling across the country he helped connect. Every journey reminded him of the people buried beneath the tracks. The forgotten laborers, the immigrants, the soldiers, the dreamers, the dead. The last ride of Thomas Carter. In 1887, Elijah's father became seriously ill. Years of hard labor and harsh winters had destroyed his body. One evening, while sitting beside a railroad station in Kansas, Thomas watched another locomotive thunder across the sunset. Smoke drifted across golden fields. Passengers waved from windows. Children laughed inside the train cars. America was alive. Thomas smiled weakly. "We really changed the world, didn't we?" he whispered. Elijah nodded. "Yes, Dad." Thomas looked toward the endless tracks. "When I was young, this country felt impossible to cross. Now steel connects everything." He coughed painfully. "But promise me something." "What is it?" "Never let people forget who built it." A few days later, Thomas Carter died peacefully. Elijah buried him beside the railroad tracks he had spent his entire life building. America enters the industrial age. By the late 1800s, railroads had become the heartbeat of America. Gigantic stations rose in major cities. Luxury trains carried wealthy passengers across breathtaking landscapes. Mail traveled faster than ever before. Time zones were even created because railroads required standardized schedules. Modern America was born from railroad expansion. But not everyone benefited equally. Workers organized strikes demanding fair wages and safer conditions. Some protests turned violent. The Pullman strike of 1894 shocked the nation when railroad traffic across large parts of America stopped completely. The same system that united the country could also paralyze it. The railroad had become too powerful. Still, trains remained symbols of American ambition. They represented movement, freedom, opportunity, and destiny. The Old Engineer. In 1915, Elijah Carter was an old man. His hair had turned white. His hands were rough with scars from decades beside steel tracks. One autumn evening, he boarded a passenger train traveling west. As the locomotive moved through endless plains, Elijah stared out the window silently. He remembered everything: the camps, the snowstorms, the explosions, the golden spike, his father's voice, the men who never lived long enough to see the railroad finished. A young boy sitting nearby noticed Elijah's railroad badge. "Mister," the child asked, "did you ever work on the railroad?" Elijah smiled softly. "Yes." "Was it exciting?" The old engineer looked toward the horizon where the sunset painted the sky red and gold. Then he answered carefully, "It was beautiful." He paused. "And terrible." The boy looked confused. Elijah continued, "America was built by people willing to suffer for a future they would never fully see." The train whistle echoed across the darkening plains. For a moment, Elijah could almost hear the voices of the past traveling beside the rails. The legacy of steel. The railroad changed America forever. It transformed a divided nation into an industrial superpower. It accelerated migration, commerce, technology, and communication. But history remembers more than achievements. It remembers sacrifices too. Thousands of workers died building the railroads. Immigrant laborers endured unimaginable hardships. Native communities lost land and freedom. Nature itself was reshaped by expansion. The railroad became both a triumph and a tragedy. That is the truth of history. Progress often arrives carrying both hope and pain. Final scene. Winter, 1920. A lonely railroad track stretched across the American plains beneath falling snow. An old steam locomotive moved slowly through the storm. Inside one passenger car sat Elijah Carter, now nearing the end of his life. He watched the tracks disappear into white darkness ahead. For more than 50 years, those rails had carried America forward. Families, soldiers, dreamers, immigrants, workers, fortunes, and memories. As the train whistle echoed into the frozen night, Elijah closed his eyes peacefully. The railroad continued westward through the storm, endlessly, like history itself.